So last time I did the top 10, or well, not necessarily top 10, but 10 or so overrated albums or bands. I mainly wanted to discuss that because there's just been a lot of discourse where people would consider this or that the greatest of something ever, and I just kind of heard it and I was kind of like, it's not necessarily awful. I don't think it's bad, but it's just not the peak of its genre, the cream a la cream, so to speak. It's not the cream of the top or something like that. So these are 10 or so underrated bands that I think are arguably the cream of the crop, and I don't really hear them discussed a lot. And there are some albums on there that I got recommended or I saw online, and I just kind of wanted to mention these because there are also reviewers that reviewed it as well, which probably got more views as probably have more views than this video will get, almost 100%. But I just kind of wanted to highlight them, to just spread the word about their quality because I just don't really hear a lot about it. There's just been like a few people here and there that talk about these albums, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, I mean these are actually pretty good. So why don't why are they not more my English I swear why do they not get mentioned more often? I kind of wonder about that. So that's kind of my point with this video, just to just kind of spread and recommend some albums or bands that you might not have heard of. So I think I counted 15 tabs on Ratio Music that I have open right here. So I'll just kind of start off with the first one, which is kind of a quiet, moody one. So if you're not into that type of music, then you can skip this part. But the first album I have is the self-titled Giles Corey album. I think that's how you pronounce his name. So this is basically one half of the band Have a Nice Life, and I love that band. That band is amazing because they have kind of this gloomy kind of atmospheric shoegaze kind of vibe. So they do shoegaze, they do a bit of post punk on the side. They have this goth rock sound, so they basically just sound like The Cure, but just way more depressing than they could ever be. It literally sounds like you're getting dragged into the abyss. It's fucking amazing. I love that sound. So that's an amazing sound. And this is basically the solo equivalent of that. So it's a bit more well, can you get more moody than Have a Nice Life? I don't think so. It's a bit more folksy, it's a bit more rootsy. So you get a bit more of that contemporary folk on here. It's one of the genres. Slowcore as well, like it says. It's just very brooding, slow, and just really atmospheric. It sounds like you're walking through like a death church or something, or like a graveyard. And then you also have this singer-songwriter kind of aesthetic to it, this kind of like the style, which I just really appreciate. I think it's a really cool sound. And like it says in the influences as well, just like very dark, avant-garde, experimental. And I think for those reasons, it's a pretty cool record. So I would definitely recommend it if if you've heard Have a Nice Life, Deaf Consciousness, or The Unnatural World. I think The Unnatural World. I can't speak, but their second album. If you haven't heard those two albums, or you have heard those two albums, and you want to get more of their music, without listening to the third one, I would recommend this one. His second album is also not the greatest. He kind of just made like one magical record and then he kind of disappeared. Or he was like a social studies or like a teacher, I believe. So, I think he just continued doing that. But his music career is pretty amazing. Like Deaf Consciousness and this, pretty great, pretty great. So definitely recommend it if you're into like Nick Drake or Jeff Buckley or something like that, you know, kind of that moody, avant-garde, kind of folksy stuff, then definitely listen to this. I used to listen a lot to Nick Drake, and I still love Nick Drake, but I think that, you know, for my kind of gloomy, kind of atmospheric folk music, I usually just go to Giles Corey. I think he is one of the best of his genre. Then we have the amazing power metal band Running Wild. I already ordered a hoodie from them because I'm just amazed by this band. And I'm not sure if I have like a top 10 order for this, but as far as like the underrated skill, this is definitely like, I think top 3. Like at least top 5, maybe top 3. Because this is one of these bands that's they're pretty eccentric. They're well, wild, like their name would suggest. They're just kind of all over the place, but they're also really fun, catchy, and engaging. So it's just a lot of fun to listen to them, like any album, to be honest. But, you know, Death or Glory is the most consistent kind of set of songs that you can listen to. So that's usually the one I would throw on. They also have this album in 93, I believe. 92, Pile of Skulls. I forgot the name of it, but there's like a really great song on there that I love. Like that long epic one. Treasure Island, that's also the closer. That's just perfect. That's an amazing song. That's a fucking anthem right there. But, you know, that's only one example of their greatness. Then you go like the entire Death or Glory album, and you get Riding the Storm, Renegade, Highland Glory, you know, Marooned, I also thought was pretty great. Bad to the Bone, catchy. The title track, amazing. And Battle of Waterloo, like the final closer is just... It's peak power metal. Like, you can't get more epic than that. Like, Halloween, Blind Guardian, you know, suck it. Just suck it, because Battle of Waterloo is the greatest thing in power metal. I don't care what anyone says. That song is fucking amazing. It's almost 8 minutes long. It has like this really brooding kind of this anthemic build up to it, and then it just goes balls out. I'm just in love with that song. That's such an amazing song. And I'm surprised that not many people talk about this band. Well, if you click on power metal, they're almost at the top. They're almost the top band, at least on Rage Music. You know what the average power metal fan consumes. It doesn't really concern me, but I'm just saying, look at these statistics. I'm a music nerd, you know. Look at these statistics. They're, in my eyes, they're the best band in the genre, because no one is more epic than them, you know. Halloween is more iconic, I guess, or they're more popular, so of course they're there. And Blind Guardian is basically the face of modern power metal, so I can't deny the influence of Blind Guardian, but listen to this album. It's amazing. I'm surprised that not many people talk about this band, because I'm just like, every song is like a potential hit. Like, how is this band not more popular? I'm kind of surprised about it, but definitely comes high recommended. I'm in love with this album. It's easily the best thing I've heard in power metal, and even maybe in heavy metal, maybe. But who knows? Then we get The Sham Mirrors by Arcturus. And this is an album that I was kind of struggling to like, because back in the day I usually listened to their first album, and I thought that was kind of cool. And then I came to this album and I was kind of like, I think I prefer the first one, because it's a bit more consistent. It's a bit more in that Emperor kind of way, like that symphonic black metal style. And this album is more so like straight up symphonic and just avant-garde, like the title would suggest. And now I think it's really cool. I gave it a 3.5 right there, but I would probably just bump it up to maybe a 5. 4.5 for now. Maybe a 5. I just really love the grooves on this, on this record. So Kinetic has like a really groovy kind of intro to it to kind of lull you into the record. Then Nightmare Heaven is just phenomenal. The composition on there is great. Ad Absurdum has some really strange and hooky time progressions or like chord structures, I guess. It's just a very unconventional song. So I think that was also the song where they kind of like they kind of sing their oohs and their ahs in the end. I'm not sure how you say that, but they kind of harmonize with each other in the ending while these fucking symphonic metal riffs crush over, their harmonies. I'm just kind of like, this is kind of like an insane carnival or something like that. I think it's really cool for that reason. Yeah, the other songs are also really good. I think that Radical Cut or Starcross is like just consistently like trashing out, while you have these like symphonic beats and the kind of the operatic singer just screaming over it. I'm like, this is like a shit show, but I love it because it's so weird. And then for to end yet again, kind of strange title, almost sounds dyslectic, but I love the song. This might be my all-time favorite Arctur song because you have these riffs. It kind of comes in slowly again. It has kind of like this kind of classical tinge, this kind of intro, and then he has these vocal melodies. For to win, he just there's just a lot of melody and a lot of compassion in the way he sings it and the way he holds a note. I think it's really fun and really pretty to listen to this record, especially those kind of chord progressions. When those moments happen, when like he holds a note and he sings like really great, and then the song still grooves on, still has kind of like this symphonic avant-garde groove to it, while he sings over that. And he is a good singer. I really like the singer's voice. So this album is just really like pretty weird, symphonic, avant-garde. It's just all over the place. It's inconsistent as hell, but that's probably why I love it. That's probably why I would consider avant-garde metal my favorite kind of genre in metal. I think I said it on the tier list. I just love how fucking all over the place and how sporadic and just random this album is. It's kind of like maybe this is the easiest avant-garde album to get into. Maybe I would definitely recommend it if you're getting into avant-garde metal. Then definitely start out with this, Mr. Bungle, Model of the Well, is Celtic Frost avant-garde. Monetiest, maybe that. But it's a bit gloomy though. I would definitely start out with this. This is a lot more brighter, happy, a lot more symphonic, like the title would say. But yeah, great album. I don't usually ever hear about this. I got it recommended from Cover Killer Nation, and this is honestly like the only kind of symphonic record I ever got into. Like I listened to some Nightwish on the side. I thought that was pretty fun. That's probably like my straight up traditional symphonic band. But then you hear like Epica and Within Temptation, and I'm just kind of like, this is a bit slop. I think a bit generic. I mean, I don't hate that stuff, but I don't get engaged by those bands. And then I hear this. I hear the grooves on Kinetic. I hear like the harmonies on Ad Absurdum. I hear that like that vocal melody on For to End Yet Again. There are just so many parts on this album that are just great. And every time I put it on, I'm having a blast. I'm like, fuck, this is great. So yeah, for those reasons, I think it's underrated. And it's definitely the best symphonic metal album I've ever heard. It's also arguably the greatest avant-garde album I've ever heard. But right there might be my favorite one, if you can see that shit. But yeah, I mean, a lot of avant-garde metal is great. This is definitely another one of them. Then we get a band that's, well, not necessarily an album. I do want to say that this is not specifically targeted to albums, but that was just an example. I think Arcturus in general is underrated. But this is a band that more so represents a genre, a subgenre of sorts. And I think a lot of people are mainly into, You know what I see, at least on the surface, they're mainly into more upbeat, in your face, kind of like EDM, hip hop, pop, traditional kind of music in a sense, where a lot more BPM is present. And this band is an entire middle finger to that generation. You know, more of the Zoomer, or well, what do you call it today? Like Gen Z. I don't keep up with those terms, but basically the modern youth. I sound really old right now, but the modern generation would probably hate this album because it's really slow, it's really brooding, it's kind of like Giles Corey. Um, so it's hard for me to recommend this because I know that a lot of people just like in your face, kind of like loud EDM music, and I like this sometimes as well when I like work out, or you know, when I'm doing something like business oriented. I do like to hear hard shit, you know, just hard blast EDM, you know, metal, like Running Wild or something. But this album is just like really slow, really atmospheric. There's just a lot of like, um, there's a lot of death and despair on here. Um, this band in general, I mean. But of course, within the realm of A Dying Sun is kind of their magnum opus. It's kind of like their, um, yeah, I mean, just that. So yeah, you have this guy that opens up with the album, where he kind of croons, he kind of just sings with his beautiful voice, Anywhere Out of the World, which is just an amazing opening song. I'm just kind of like, fuck, man, that's a great voice, so good. Windfall's kind of filler. In the Wake of the Adversity is also pretty good. Xavier is probably like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard. Just the way that they kind of play on, I think, an organ or like a piano, like an altered, kind of rich sounding, like church piano. It kind of sounds like. Don't quote me on that. It just kind of sounds like that. But you get this like really eerie, ominous kind of feeling when you listen to Xavier, and then it builds up slowly and slowly, and you basically just get this 1 or 2 minute like piano intro, this instrumental, and then this dude starts opening up, really like mysterious, dark, and then he just opens up with these fucking gorgeous vocals, and I'm like, wow, this is like a dark classical masterpiece, and I think the title describes it perfectly. Neoclassical dark wave. It's kind of like this dark, this like fucking heavy ass dark classical piece that just, it sounds like you're listening to classical composers in like a graveyard. It's so fucking good. Yeah, so Xavier is definitely one of the finest pieces of music I've ever heard in my life. I'm not exaggerating with that. It's fucking beautiful. I love that song. And then you know the first half is for him specifically, like he is mainly the singer on that, and then they switch it up with female vocals, and I also like her. People probably, they mainly say that they enjoy the female vocals on her. I used to be like that. I'm a bit on the guy side right now, on like the A side, because his vocals are just out of another world. Like his vocals are fucking beautiful. I love the guy's voice on there. Um, the female singers also good, but I'm less inclined to enjoy them because they're a bit more operatic and a bit more loud, I would say. So they kind of disrupt the atmosphere on this album. Not entirely though. I don't think she ruins this album, but I definitely have to kind of shift some gears, you know, to really get into her groove. If you get what I'm saying, I do have to kind of, you know, change my kind of, um, I guess my listening experience. The listening experience just changes with her. It's just a different vibe. With you know, when the guy sings, I'm just kind of like, yeah, I can just vibe to this and just zone out. I'm just having a blast. And with the girl, it's a bit more operatic. It's a bit more in your face. So you're a bit more attentive to it. You're a bit more, you know, concentrating on the experience because she's very attention grabbing, I would say. That's at least how I see it. Because with Dawn of the Iconoclast, she's just basically straight up in your face and introducing herself. So she's definitely making an entrance for herself. I appreciate that, but I do have to be in a specific kind of mood to listen to that song because it's very demanding of your attention. And then Cantera, uh, yeah, I think that's how you say it. Cantera sounds a bit more. I would say a bit more classical again. So it starts out with like a 2 minute instrumental, and then she kind of lulls you into the experience. So I think that's also pretty cool. Summoning of the Muse is a masterpiece because it basically sounds like you're going through your own like a funeral or something. It's like really just depressing and kind of full of despair. And then she sings over that. It actually sounds like she's singing over. It sounds like she's singing over a classical piece. So I think that's really beautiful. I think her vocals really shine on that melody, and I think it's easily her best performance that I've heard yet. It's a beautiful song. It used to be my favorite. I think it's my second favorite now, my third favorite. You just can't stop Xavier for me. That's just that's just the cherry on top. That's just an absolute masterpiece. So yeah, that song is the best. Anywhere out of the Anywhere Out of the World is probably my third favorite, and then Summoning of the Muse is my second favorite for now. And then Persephone, kind of like a moody outro song. I'm not gonna talk about every song like I did in the past, but yeah, but definitely a cool vibe. I definitely just really vibe and dig this record's groove. And I think that more people should mention Dead Can Dance because not a lot of bands sound like they're going to a funeral, they're taking pictures of like tombstones and they're singing about it. That you don't really hear that a lot. I think that's a pretty rare atmosphere that I think more bands should embrace. If you're into that type of mood, I think it's a really cool sound. So I would definitely recommend it if you're into that type of vibe. If you're kind of like a goth kid, this is probably like your soundtrack. So if you don't know it yet, listen to it. And if you are unaware of new classical darkwave, this is basically the blueprint for everything that came after. So yeah, amazing album. Another amazing album, of course, I don't really hear this band mentioned a lot, is Rainbow. Specifically, their album Rising, I think, is pretty amazing because you have this very atmospheric kind of this brooding synthesizer song, Tired Woman, that opens up amazingly. I just love the riffs from Richie Blackmore, and Dio singing over this is just it's peak. It's just absolute peak for me. This album also essentially created power metal, although I do prefer Running Wild in a sense. But if this album didn't exist or Rainbow didn't exist, you arguably wouldn't have power metal. They invented that style of music. You can't deny that. So for those reasons, I do have to give my respect to this album, or to this band rather. And yeah, I'm just kind of surprised that not more people talk about Rainbow because I think they're a pretty phenomenal band. And I think they should get more praise because usually all the love and respect goes to Black Sabbath for heavy metal and Led Zeppelin for hard rock. And, those are two great bands. I do love those bands, but I do think that Rainbow should be more present in the conversation as well because, you get Tired Woman on there, you get Starstruck, Do You Close Your Eyes, I think are also pretty catchy. Stargazer, of course. I mean, that's the great. That's one of the greatest like hard rock heavy metal songs ever made. If you listen to that song and you don't think that, you're deaf. Your ears are not working. Have you heard Stargazer? Amazing song, fucking amazing song. You can't deny that. The way it opens up with the drums, the drum intro, how Dio sings over it, the guitar solos from Richie Blackmore, the way that Dio kind of yells or like screams out. He's going home, raising his fist in the air, in the music video. I'm just kind of like, that's the biggest fuck yes in metal ever. Hard rock metal, whatever you want to call it. That's just the biggest fuck yes ever when he does that, and the song kind of reaches its end. It reaches its climax when the guitar solo hits its strive, and when Dio sings over that later, or later his vocals come in again. I'm just kind of like, wow. I was not aware that music could sound like that, so I'm just really impressed by that. And if you're not, you shouldn't be listening to hard rock or heavy metal, like period. You just shouldn't listen to it because you don't appreciate arguably the greatest song ever in that genre. I think like music is subjective, and I do think that everyone has their own musical opinion, but that's probably the most objective thing I could say about music. Stargazer is great. It's like saying the sky is blue, or like water makes you wet or something like that. It's as obvious as that, and you can't really top that. So instead of that, they have another song on there which is called "A Light in the Black," which has the same length, kind of the same chord structure, kind of the same kind of rhythm. But I also think it's pretty cool. The synthesizers and the drums. Cozy Poa, I believe, is the drummer. I think he's a really phenomenal drummer in general. And I think they just have a really cool groove that you also have in the end, where they just kind of jam out with each other with the synthesizer, the drums. Richie Blackmore, they all just kind of jam out with each other, which I also think is pretty cool. So in general, I think this is a pretty phenomenal album, and I think that Rising is rising in popularity, but I don't hear a lot about Rainbow in general. In comparison with Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Scorpions, Deep Purple, etc. The greats of the genre. I think Rainbow should be in there as well. I think they are, but they should be mentioned more because they're simply stunning. Then we have arguably my favorite avant-garde metal band, which is Modern of the Well. I am one of those people that I'm always kind of like, Beth is amazing. And I kind of, had a back and forth with someone, and someone said, leaving your body map is so much better than Beth. And I'm like, yeah, but Beth has the Blue Ghost, Heaven and Weak, which that's a fucking amazing song. That's arguably my favorite right now. The Ferryman, which has like really great breakdowns and just a really atmospheric, kind of symphonic, kind of vibe to it. I was not aware that Girl with a Watering Can was bolded, and the Ferryman isn't. That's kind of interesting to me, because I usually consider this the weakest song, but apparently Rage Music loves it. So I guess music is subjective. Of course it is, but and Bird Pains of Astral Projection is arguably the greatest thing I've ever heard in metal, like in general. Like the chord structures, the way it opens with this kind of jazzy instrumental kind of feels. It sounds really warm and fuzzy. And I mean, Toby Driver's also just a phenomenal singer, phenomenal composer. Just everything that he touches just turns into solid gold, I believe, because I mean, look at this album; it's almost has a gold color. But yeah, I mean, the structure on it, the compositions, just everything about the song is just chef's kiss, just absolutely amazing. And I just love to hear it every time. I don't get tired of this band. And if you're like into really like moody, like very atmospheric and kind of like almost depressing kind of songs, then Geography is probably the greatest closer on a Motlin album, because it's just Toby Driver with an acoustic guitar and kind of his jazzy backing band backing him up while he's singing. What did he sing again? Sleep on your birthday and cry, cry, my baby. I'm not sure if he said baby, but that kind of vibe in general. Every time I hear that, I'm just kind of like, fuck, man, because I also don't like personally. I usually don't really care about birthdays, so I'm kind of like I don't care if someone remembers me that day. But secretly you're like, I would have appreciated it. So Toby Driver also hits a personal string for me because I usually don't really have that. So geography kind of tearing at my heartstrings right now. I'm kind of like, fuck, man. So I mean, for those reasons, I do have to give it 5 stars, right? Because Toby Driver's literally playing with my heart. You genius bastard. I mean, this album is just amazing. I fucking love Mother of the Well. That's probably why you see that vinyl right there. I mean, I can't deny my love for this band. I mean, Beth, Leaving Your Body Map is also great. That's I gave it 4. Maybe blasphemy for some people. Because the usual consensus with Model of the Well is that you listen to Beth and Leaving Your Body Map. Like, that's the complete experience. And I usually listen to Beth and I get a pretty satisfying feel with that. Usually when I listen to this, it feels like kind of overtime or filler, which might be a very controversial opinion because most people seem to prefer this album over Beth. And I'm kind of like, Beth is a million times better. I like it way better because it has fucking Birth Pains, The Ferryman, Blue Ghost, I think is beautiful, Heaven and Weak. I mean, it's basically a greatest hits of avant-garde records. So I'm like, why is this album better to people? I don't get it. I mean, Bizarre Flowers is pretty good, but fuck, I mean, the curve I also really like. But I don't really care for these interludes. I'm like, it's kind of filler in my opinion, I love this band. I think they're fucking great, but man, I think that Beth is so much better. I mean, I just don't get it, Not to throw shit on Leaving Your Body Map. I just think this album is way better. That's, I guess, my subjective opinion. But yeah, I mean, in general, if you think this album is overrated, this is underrated. This band in general is just underrated. And I think in recent memory, they're being a more popular avant-garde band because usually if you go to this stack, then they're second. And the third album, KO Dot, is also a side project from Toby Driver. So you can almost say that he kind of owns this stack almost. So are they really underrated? I'm not sure if they're underrated in this genre, but in general, they're pretty underrated because avant-garde metal is not the most prominent, the most popular, trendy metal genre out there. So I think in general, they're underrated. Maybe for the genre, they're fairly rated, or maybe some people would say overrated. But if you listen to like Birth Pains or The Curve to an Angel or some shit, if you listen to those songs and you think that like a normie can get into that, you're kind of insane. You're kind of insane if you think that. So it's definitely an underrated band, I would say, an underrated genre even. Yeah, avant-garde is underrated. Fuck it. It's definitely it's definitely a acquired taste, but it's definitely a taste I cannot get enough of. Then the next band artist, I suppose, is Lil Ugly Mane. And I've mentioned Lil Ugly Mane here and there in videos and in tier lists and stuff. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, I also enjoyed this Lil Ugly Mane kind of record, but I never really went in full detail about him. So this is basically kind of I believe a guy out, Richmond, it says there. Yeah, let's just say US. Basically a guy from the United States that he was kind of a producer, I believe, or like an underground influencer, or like, well, not influencer per se, but more so an underground jockey, kind of a rapper. And he also produced a lot. I think that was kind of his main thing. He was mainly a like kind of producer for beats, and I believe he played in black metal bands before, so he also has kind of an extreme side to his music. And you can definitely see that back in his album covers because it's all like really atmospheric I just use that word a lot. It's very experimental, dense, a lot of layers. I'm not going to show the third type cover because anal sex. But yeah, I mean, a lot of variables. Like he's playing experimental hip hop on here. This is southern hip hop, I believe. The tape albums are instrumental. Volcanic Bird is like a psychedelic pop record, I believe. Like this dude is all over the place. Like if my music taste was an artist, it would probably be Lil Ugly Mane. And I think for those reasons, he's a very underrated kind of producer because most people kind of push him on the side. If you do know him, they kind of push him on the wayside, and they're like, he's too weird for me. He's too out there, too neglectic, or too eclectic for me. And I'm kind of like, yeah, but that's what makes him great. He's so great because he's so out there. He's so vivid with his musical styles. He's so just experimental with whatever he does. Because I can almost quote this album. That's how much I've listened to it. Like you have some serious shit here. Well, um, being all serious about it. It's a bit more straightforward to just kind of lean you into the record. Then Maniac is just this sporadic, all over the place, just this insane kind of hip hop song that it's just constantly like right there in your face, and it's almost suffocating. The amount of layers and lyrics he throws at you it's pretty insane. This song is pretty great. It just like sounds a bit more distorted, a bit more experimental, and then there's a beat switch midway through the song, and you just get hit with these constant hard beats, and he raps harder, he raps faster, and it just sounds like a gut punch the entire time. It's fucking great. Maybe my favorite song of the album. Then you got Slick Rick, which is basically just this really like dirty anthem where he's singing about like a fruit box or something, and then he's saying like, "Yeah, suck my dick, bitch," and "Ooh, I don't marry no woman because I ain't loyal to her," and "Yeah, fuck you." It's just constant middle fingers left and right, and I'm just kind of like, this song is kind of gross, but it's pretty catchy. So, kind of my guilty pleasure of the album, I suppose. Wishmaster, another banger. Bitch, I'm luxurious. Kind of, I think the main anthem on there is probably my least favorite. Um, yeah, just a lot of fun songs. Maybe some filler here and there. Twisting with Denzel Curry is pretty fun. No Slack in My Mac goes fucking hard. The beats on there, just the way he's spitting, man, it's fucking great. Looking for the Sucking, another like kind of BJ anthem. So this is a pretty grimy record. Like it's not clean. This is not a clean artist. So there's definitely like a parental advisory sticker on this recommendation. Like only proceed to this record if you're like an actual adult, 18 or 21 plus. If you're below that age, I wouldn't watch this video if I were you because I'm a pretty excessive person. So minors do not watch this. But yeah, if you've seen these titles, I wouldn't recommend this to a child personally. So yeah, that's kind of obvious, I suppose. Um, yeah, these are also some fun albums. The outro is also pretty good. Actually, on this version, it has the outro "Sent Them to the Essence," which I was not aware was on this album. Because usually I would listen to this song as a bonus track because on Spotify they do not have "Set Them to the Essence." They just kind of cut that out, I suppose. But on Rage Music, it says it's actually the closer, which this is probably like my favorite Lil Ugly Man song. So if it is on there, this album is like actual perfection. If it's not on there, it's still like one of my all-time favorite albums. So it's 5 stars either way. But Send Them to the Essence maybe makes it even 6 stars. It's that good. It's such a good album. And yeah, I don't really hear Lil Ugly Mane mentioned in the conversation as far as like Memphis rap goes or Southern hip hop. Usually those titles go to 3 6 Mafia and Outkast. But I think this is probably like my favorite of both of those genres, like Memphis and Southern hip hop. Personally, I would say. So there you go. Then I mean, I've already praised this album in like my overrated list because I was shitting on radio. That's kind of a tradition here. But yeah, I mean, this album is just it's very trance inducing. It kind of sounds like you're listening to like a techno trance album. But it also is very atmospheric. It kind of lulls you into a kind of an atmosphere, kind of a beat. But it's also really pretty. Like I think that's the main thing what I love about Orbital. They kind of have this idea or they have this creation and they have a foundation where they build on. And then after they've set that foundation, they just kind of build layers and layers and layers on top of that foundation. And when you're like 8 minutes into a song, it sounds like you're listening to like a batch of psychedelic classical composition or something. It sounds fucking insane how dense and how experimental and how rich this band sounds. Like I just love how this sounds. It's very pretty. It's very delicate. It's very layered. There's just a lot of rich detail in this record, which I really love about it. I mean, the girl with the sun in her eyes might be my least favorite song. At the moment because it's very easy to get into. It's very easy to get into the groove, and because of those reasons, it engages me less. But nonetheless, it's still the best opening song that you could put on there because it's more accessible. It's more sunny, like the title would suggest. It's definitely the most upbeat song on this album because when you listen to Dubber Butter or something, I'm not sure how you say that. It sounds like you're listening to like a glitchy record that's skipping all the time, but it also sounds like it's demented or something. It's a very kind of ominous, kind of spooky, weird, strange kind of record. But for those reasons, I just really love the grooves and just the melodies on it are just insane to me. And the Out There Somewhere outro, two-part on there is probably the best sounds I've ever heard. Like whatever you want to call it, like the best kind of outro, eccentric, like the best musical sounds I've ever heard in my life. Like the beats on the first part and just the way it blends out and just the layers of how it goes out. It's the best. It's just the absolute. I can't even express how much I love it. That's how great it is, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, for those reasons, I mean, Orbital is definitely like a legend in electronic music. But I think for the general public, they're not a very well known band because for most, techno and shit, I think that the main like contextual king of the genre is Avex Twin, which I also love. But I prefer Avex Twin in his more chaotic kind of drum and bass era because that was way more dense and experimental, in my opinion. And in my opinion, Orbital did this sound the best. They did it better than Avex Twin, in my opinion. Love them both. Love them both to death. They're both like amazing artists, but Insights is just it's probably the greatest piece of music I've ever heard. So I can't give a higher accolade than that. It's the best. It's just the best in my opinion. So for those reasons, it always makes it underrated in my eyes. So there you go. The next artist is someone that I do really appreciate, and I think he is already like quite popular in the state. I mean, it's kind of funny because he is actually from. Well, I live more in the middle of in the Netherlands, and he lives like kind of in the south because it says Brabant here, which basically means like the south of the Netherlands. So like at the border of Belgium, I believe. I'm not the greatest with maps, but with location. But there you go. But yeah, I mean, nonetheless, he is like a regional artist for me. Like, I'm also Dutch, so I could actually see this guy and actually interact with him, talk the same language because that's how languages work, right? But yeah, either way, I kind of have a infamy with Dutch artists because I kind of threw how are they called again? I kind of threw Within Temptation and Epica under the bus earlier because I was kind of like, well, not under the bus per se, but I kind of disregarded them because it's just symphonic music that doesn't really interest me. But Arion is a different case for me because he's just kind of this weird, kind of like this nerdy kind of dork that sits in this room, is like fucking with buttons all the time, and he's like making these conceptual like progressive rock operas, and he's just sitting there like the absolute nerd that he is, and he's just making these eccentric, like these big conceptual pieces. And they come out into the Electric Castle, has some really amazing songs on it, and then he just makes an album full of conceptual bangers. Like, this is just straight up banger after banger for me. That's what the youth would say. So you have all these like concepts like isolation and pain, mystery, childhood, like all those like kind of emotional baggage that you have, all those emotional memories that stay with you. He kind of talks about that. He talks about that with different composers, different singers. He also has, I believe, Michael Eckerfeld from Opeth, James Labrie from Dream Theater, which I also kind of consider for my favorites list, but Dream Theater is a bit too pretentious for me. Not that this isn't pretentious, but I just kind of like the general vibe more of Ariel, I think. So you have all these great songs. Yeah, there was also like a team on there. I believe that was Isolation, where he kind of like, I believe Michael Eckerfeld sings on it, and they're kind of just going back and forth that, oh, that one person, oh, he should reach out to you, but he isn't doing that, and you're just kind of waiting on the day to reconnect, and maybe you've done too much wrong to make things right and shit. And I'm just kind of like, are they reading my are they reading my diary or something? Like, what the fuck? It's almost creepy how accurate those lyrics are. And I usually don't really care for lyrics, but this album like really sits at home for me because it just kind of sounds like an emotional roller coaster journey. And for those reasons, it also resurrects with me. Or how do you say that? It resonates with me. Resurrects, or what? It resonates with me a lot because of those emotional themes. And I think for those reasons, you also read deeper into the lyrics because it also resonates with you. It resonates with you on a personal level. And I think for those reasons, this is a really beautiful album. Like, it's called The Human Equation, and it really feels like you're making a human connection with this album, but also with Arion himself. It sounds like a really like delicate personal piece of his own life that he's pouring into this album, with all these collaborators, with all these other singers that are vibing with him. They're thriving in this album, they're thriving in the emotion and in the themes, and Arion brings it all together like one gigantic kind of big experimental opera. I've heard the Deer Hunter, I've heard some Genesis albums that are also conceptual. The Wall are also pretty popular, but this album always just front to back sounded the tightest to me. Always it made me feel the most human, like the title would suggest. But it also makes me feel the most appreciated, like I'm heard, like these people know what I'm going through. They know what the human equation is, and it just makes you like really feel like a human being. Like, sometimes the industry and shit can feel really industrial and just dark, like you're just a statistic on a paper. But this album really just makes that personal connection. It's saying, oh, it's okay, man. We all make our fuck ups. We all, die and shit, and we all do this and that. But you gotta move forward. And sometimes you just really need an album that says that to you, because you don't always have that person that says it for you or validates your feelings. So in that sense, Arion kind of did that with this album. And I've never really thought about it that way. It just kind of spontaneously came out of my mouth right there. That was not scripted. I swear to God. But yeah, I mean, for those reasons, I just really appreciate the kind of human value that it has. Ironically enough, also just I believe Loser was also like probably the biggest hit on there. Love is just the symphonies and like kind of the melodies on there are just fucking great. And my favorite song is Confrontation because it has kind of like this dense kind of this organ intro, and then it just goes out with this fucking balls to the wall riff towards the last 2 minutes. It just spirals out, and then this whole like control room crashes out. And like fuck, man, that's so fun. That's such a fun song. This whole album is just fun as fuck and emotional. It has an emotional quality. It's catchy. It's captivating. It's ambitious. You know, what else do you want in your music? I think it's great. And I think this album is sort of popular, but I don't really hear a lot about it. In you know, especially rock opera, you usually get your Pink Floyd, your Genesis, sometimes the Deer Hunter, I believe, stuff like that. You like your like typical kind of rock bands, but I don't hear this mentioned a lot. So I was kind of like, yeah, it's underrated, right? So, and even if it's not, it's underrated to me on a human equality, on a human equality, if I can say the word. Also, an album that's kind of resonated with me is This Binary Universe, because BT is mainly known for kind of his trance days, like I believe Still Life in Movement and These Hopeful Machines, I believe it's called. Those are mainly like his two go-to trance records, and I think those are really like great, phenomenal records, especially These Hopeful Machines. But this album, I kind of heard it recently, and I was kind of walking through like a bar or something, or like a workplace or like a work party that day for Christmas holidays and shit. Well, everyone was there, and I kind of had a surreal experience with this. I was kind of like, oh man, what if I can connect with this person, or I can like make or I can like go out in town and have like this human connection, like the human equation, like that. I was kind of thinking about that. I was kind of just walking outside and just kind of figuring out my life, and I was kind of like, fuck, man, I think I have a surreal experience to this album because it was pretty quiet and cold outside, and I just kind of threw this on, and I was kind of like, damn, like this album really suited my vibe at that moment. It is like very minimal. It's very IDM, but IDM is like the main mix on there. But you have these tinges of like jazz and folktronica and just like these break beats everywhere, like very minimal break beats, electronic bits. It's a bit classical as well. I'm just listing off these fucking genres. It's glitchy. It's very ambient. It's very quiet. But there's just so much shit happening in between that it's never boring. It's never a boring ambient album like like some Godspeed or something. Like very quiet post rock shit. It's always engaging. It's always fun. It's just very minimal. So it might take a lot of time to really get into it. I didn't really get into it when I just heard it here and there, and when I just heard singular pieces on here, then I just didn't really get into it. It was just a bit too slow and tedious for me. But when I did throw on this album that day, I just fuck, man, it hit it so hard for me. And whenever I went out of town, it was like after 4 a.m. and I still enjoyed it. I was like fucking tipsy and shit, and went through all the clubs and all that, and I was just fucking wasted in my head, and I still enjoyed this album. So even with a wine or with like some beer, it's still a fucking fun album. It's fun, it's engaging, it's kind of emotional, it's tender, but it's also just consistently engaging. If I didn't say it already, it's just consistently fun and atmospheric, just everything that you can think about in an ambient mood. This album is, and usually in an IDM conversation, I don't really hear this. You hear, your Avex Twin, your Boards of Canada, stuff like that. But I don't really hear, you hear Attacker, but I don't really hear this album mentioned a lot. Mainly the trance days of BT, which are also great. all BT is arguably great, but this might be his crowning achievement. If I say so myself, it's great. I, of course, did get it recommended from the Wonky Angle because he is in love with this album, and I tend to agree with him. You know, he's one of my influences. Like, if I didn't watch his channel, I might have never gotten into Orbital. You know, like insights that's just peak right there. Maybe I didn't realize if I didn't watch this video, so I'm definitely thankful for that. BT is kind of the same thing. If he didn't recommend it, I probably wouldn't be into it as much. But yeah, listening to someone's perspective and listening to all the details that they enjoy about it can really give another perspective to you as well. So I think that's definitely a value that I appreciate in music. That you can also have other perspectives of people, and they can give you like maybe a new perspective on an album or an artist if you just listen to a review or something. That's kind of why they exist, right? You know, to hear someone's perspective on things. And I think for him specifically, I think that he has some really great recommendations, and this is definitely another one of them. I did have this on there. I used to call this kind of, boring or tedious, but I kind of usually have like a great work session with this album, or like workouts and shit, like business oriented, or like with workouts, like basically if I'm training for myself, I usually have a pretty great time to it. So yeah, I think for those reasons, I should definitely mention it more, because if you go to like the main topics in metalcore, you usually get Converge, Dillinger Escape Plan, Kill Switch Engage. What else? I mean, kind of the mainstream metalcore bands like Bullets for My Valentine. I believe they're metalcore, and I'm kind of like, have you heard this band? Like, this is mainly a progressive metal band that just has these really long, sporadic, dense kind of metalcore breakdowns. Um, and usually that's in the first half present, and then in the second half you get this like really jazzy kind of this instrumental take where they're a lot more moody and atmospheric. And I think for those reasons, I think that BT Bam should be more in the conversation as to like what's the best metalcore band. Because back in the day, I was kind of like, they're mid. Converge is way better. And as far as breakdowns goes, as far as like who's the heaviest metalcore band, it's definitely Converge for sure. Maybe Botch as well. But for like on an enjoyable basis, as to like return to it and consistently enjoy a band, I think that Between the Bear and Me is probably the most fun band to return to, because I've heard Jane Doe a million times, like most people have probably, and I'm kind of like, yeah, it's cool. I still love that album, but it kind of became gray. It kind of became white noise to me. So it's basically just white noise right now. I mean, I still love like Heaven in Our Arms, I believe, Ta, and the title track, like great songs, but when I hear them, I'm kind of like, yeah, I know how it goes, right? And I don't really have that with this album. I usually go into Informal Gluttony. It's very sporadic, very wild, but it's also like very diverse. Son of Nothing, also the same thing. Ends of the Sky, probably my favorite of this album. There are just so many pieces and like dense, music structures in this album that it never bores you. It always, like when you think they're going left, they're going right, right, left, left, right, up, down, down, up. It's always just unpredictable with this band, which makes them more fun and more captivating over time, I think. If you like more consistent metalcore, I would definitely recommend Converge. I mean, that's definitely, if you say that's the greatest metalcore band, I wouldn't disagree. Converge is fucking great. But, as far as like returning to albums, I think that Colors has more to offer, and it is a more denser and diverser experience, in my opinion. And I think for those reasons, they're underrated. Maybe some people would say they're overrated, but I think for overrated status, it would mainly have to go to probably Bullet for My Valentine or maybe Kill Switch Engage. I mean, that's blasphemy to say, but Kill Switch is great. I do love that band, but they do get a lot of praise, and their albums are not necessarily consistently engaging. They have a lot of great songs though, so they're kind of a singles band to me. Except for maybe the End of Heartache, that's pretty good, but it doesn't really match Colors or Jane Doe in my experience. Especially Colors, I think, is their best, and for those reasons, I think they should be more in the conversation. But I think that's happening. But yeah, still, I would say this is still underrated to me. So pretty good. This album is pretty out there. It's pretty wild. It's probably the most unstable or inconsistent album I've ever heard in my life, but it makes it fun. Avant prog, jazz rock, avant garde, jazz, like everything about this is avant garde and weird, and that's what I love about it. I just love like avant garde music with kind of like a jazz tinge that's also catchy and captivating, but you never know where it's going to go. Like, don't confuse that with dissonant music like Gorguts. Like, I can appreciate the diversity and just how wild everything is, but dissonant isn't catchy and engaging to me. So I can't really get into a groove with that music because it's dissonant. It's supposed to be uncatchy. That's the point of dissonant music. So I can't get into that style, but avant-garde and jazz rock is like right up my alley. And this is basically the blueprint for like avant-garde music, for jazz. I would say like jazz from metalheads, especially. I would say avant prog. I think that King Crimson did this as well, but I think that John Zorn perfected that style, in my opinion. There's just so much wild shit happening on there, and I haven't listened to it in a while because it's not on Spotify. But yeah, when I do turn it on YouTube, it is a pretty great time. Toby Driver, Molten of the Well, they wouldn't exist if this album wasn't created. So that's definitely a reason why I wanted to mention it, because it's one of those albums that it's just out there. It's so wild, insane, and just all over the place that I can't stop and adore it, because it's so. I can't even talk about this all. Like 26 songs that are all over the place. They like have breakdowns. There are moments that it's fucking grindcore, grindcore, surf rock, no wave, avant-garde, jazz rock. There's just so much variety on this album that I can't explain in words how this album makes me feel, because I don't know. I just don't know how it makes me feel, because it's just so out there. It's really one of those albums that you just have to listen to for yourself to really make a judgment on it, because I can't say it makes me feel that way, it makes me feel that way, because it's just everything and nothing. It's just all over the place. So I can't pinpoint what's good about it. It's just so fucking out there that I just appreciate it for what it is, and that's what makes it great, in my opinion. This is one of the last bands that I got into. Before I was kind of like, yeah, I think I've heard most good music right now, for me at least. Because I don't really go to newer charts or something like I showed on this one. That's just kind of the home screen here. But yeah, Nature and Organization is kind of like this avant-garde band, like avant folk, I believe, neo folk. And neo folk is a weird genre because it usually means like these shut in, kind of introverted, these quiet speakers that have kind of like a spoken word aesthetic to their music. They kind of speak that way, like with Slint or something. But it's always rootsy. It's just always folksy, neo folk. It's very like primitive and eccentric, just very easygoing music, but the lyrics usually contradict that. The lyrics are usually pretty dark and just really out there and just sporadic. So it's always a bit like counterproductive, or like what's the word I'm looking for? It's always a bit contradicting, because the music is very easygoing and free flowing, but the lyrics are usually really fucking dark and rootsy, very brooding and raw. And I think that makes for a very like vivid, kind of a wild music experience. And I think this album is the best of that sound. I think that's Current 93, I believe they're called, is the main band that gets the praise for this kind of sound. Current 93 and Deaf in June are kind of like the face of this sound. But Beauty Reaps the Blood of Solitude is like, it has more of a dark wave tinge. It is more, industrial, like the genres would say. It's a bit more catchy to me. It's a bit more easy to get into, but it's also very fucking dark, like a neo-folk album is. So for all those reasons, I just really love this album, and I've only really heard Wyatt XM talk about it. Like, this is his music recommendation, but I've only really heard him talk about it. I've never heard someone talk about this album or this band, so I definitely think for those reasons, they're underrated, in my opinion. And this is kind of the only thing that they did. I think they have also Current 93 and Deaf in June on here on the track listing. They're not credited here, but on Spotify they were. So I'm kind of like, yeah, I think that's them. Sure. So if you want the best of that world, then this is the greatest compilation of that sound of neo-folk. Because you go to their sound, and they made one other album that was less good, and then they just disbanded, or they stopped making albums, I guess. They have like one live album in 86, and then an archival, and that's it, I suppose. Also an EP, but that came with Beauty, so nothing new there, but amazing album nonetheless. Just a whole other experience nonetheless. This used to be like my top one underrated album, because this album was nowhere mentioned. Like, maybe this is popular to you. Maybe this is popular somewhere on Metal Archives or Metal Storm. I found it on Metal Storm and AllMusic personally. There's only really one critic that I follow in AllMusic that fucking loves this album. Or like he doesn't really love or hate. He's just like, this is objective good music. This is objective bad music. Ooga booga. Like, he's not that straightforward, but he's pretty fucking critical. I've seen like music boards discuss this one critic, and they're saying like, he's ruining your music side. Like, he's a very divisive kind of critic. But for those reasons, I kind of love him, because you do have to be like hated, or you do have to be interesting and very, controversial, or at least engaging in your reviews to be hated, or you just have to be a piece of shit. But he isn't, in my opinion. He's just giving his critique, so I think he's pretty great. And I think for those reasons, I checked out this album, because he said it was like 5 stars. And I mean, it's one of those critics that just hates almost everything. Like, maybe people see me like that because these are underrated albums for me, but I just hate a lot of music. Like, when I walk somewhere and like the mall, or like I go out, or I'm at work, I just hate like almost everything around me because it's shit. He's kind of like that, musically speaking. But this album is just, it's symphonic, it's classical. It's very dark, brooding, it's ominous. It's just all these music styles that I think are great, and they're just all compiled into like one metal record. This kind of sounds like a classical piece, made by a black metal band. It sounds really unique and kind of atmospheric for those reasons, because Nihil is just like a constant hit of like fucking brooding black metal. Then you get these later songs which are a bit more acoustic, acoustic and heavy. In Lands of Ashes, I believe it has like classical midway sections in the track, which is also pretty great. Latent Tizzle, just like a straight up like black metal, death metal anthem. Um, the Fallen is one of my personal favorite because it's just a symphonic black metal masterpiece in my opinion. That one song is better than Emperor's entire career in my opinion. That song just fucking slays. And then you have Night Bell, which is this very brooding, like this very dark ambient kind of piece. It sounds like you're walking through like a deserted dark wood, and you could get attacked. You could get attacked by a stabber or something, or like a wolf any moment while you're walking there. It sounds really fucking creepy and bizarre to listen to that song, but it's also very like ambient, atmospheric, just very engaging to listen to it. When I listen to individual songs on this album, I get a bit less engaged. But when I listen to the whole thing, I'm just like, wow, this is just really impressive composing in metal. Like I wasn't aware that metal could sound this rich and full. So I have a lot of respect for the composer, and I think that his later albums are, not as good as this. Like, like I've heard some people say that they prefer the later albums, and I've always been kind of like a Grisius fanboy that was disappointed by the later releases. I always kind of was like that because this album is kind of perfect to me. I'm kind of like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes it's a bit too slow and brooding for me to really like sit down for it. But when I am in that like dark, heavy, classical mood, then this is kind of the soundtrack to that. So perfect. And this was my number one, for me, my number one underrated album because I've never really heard anyone talk about it. But that was until I've really got into this last album that I've only really heard again one critic talk about. That's I believe they're a moderator on this website, Rage Music. Lie, I believe the person is called. He was kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like an underrated version of OK Computer. Like it's on that level of status, but it never got the OK Computer status. And if you know my Radiohead opinion, I think that's very unfair because that band is kind of overrated in my opinion. This is arguably, I would say, in my opinion, the most underrated band I've ever heard in my life, which is Manson. And Manson is an interesting band because I've never really heard anyone talk about this band except for that one moderator and maybe Stephen Wilson. Like those are the only two people I've ever heard talk about this band. Those are the only two I've ever heard talk about this band, and I find it strange. I listen to these guys on YouTube sometimes. I listen to the song Television, which is like the 7 minute psychedelic masterpiece. I'm like, fuck, man, this should have 1 billion views. How many views do you think it has on YouTube? Last time I clicked on it, 93. I'm like, what? Like I'm actually shocked by that. Like when I hear that, and when I hear this dude like kind of crooning over the riffs, while it goes into this like psychedelic progressive, this jam session, and he just sings over that with a fucking angel voice. I'm like, fuck, man, so beautiful. Like so much passion, emotion, and atmosphere in that voice. And I'm like, wow, this is actual heaven. Like it's kind of like Death Can Dance with the vocal department, but just like actually upbeat and happy, I'm like, fuck, man, that's so fucking good. How many views? 93. I'm like, how are we listening to the same band? Why are not more people talking about this band? I'm like, fuck, man. Um, so most people, this critic, they love it, and for those reasons, I kind of checked it out because they're also a pretty critical person when it comes to like music ratings. And usually, when you would, check their ratings, they would also be pretty critical or like mediocre with their reviews, or like they gave out mediocre scores. So also, this moderator also has a pretty critical ear for music, would explain why they are moderators, right? That would make sense. Um, so yeah, I was kind of like, wow. The only album that I kind of agreed on that they gave 5 stars is Introducing by DJ Shadow. And also for that reason, I absolutely fucking love DJ Shadow, especially Introducing for him and the Wonky Angle, because it's kind of like an obvious masterpiece. It's kind of like saying Pulp Fiction is kind of a good movie, right? It's kind of saying like that, Introducing kind of a good album. It's kind of the same thing. It's so obvious you shouldn't even say it. And this album is also pretty like catchy, laid back, but it's also like very sarcastic and very fucking gloomy. That's kind of a theme with me. Like I love these like gloomy, underrated discs that you don't really hear a lot about, but I do think they deserve it. Before I really go into the track listing, I should mention that these guys were part of the Britpop movement. And I'm not necessarily a huge Britpop fan. I do like all of like the big four of Britpop. I think they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. Like Pulp has some amazing songs. They don't really have a good album, in my opinion. Suede, pretty good band, but I can't really get into the vocals. Oasis, I think, is pretty great, especially the first 2 albums. But after that, they became kind of a slop band, in my opinion. Well, I think that's almost kind of universally accepted. When Noel Gallagher got like all his money, he just kind of cashed out and he was like, "Yeah, be here now, be a fucking square," something like that. Blur's probably like my favorite mainstream band because they've been a pretty consistent great band. But I consider them more so an artsy rock band rather than Britpop. But that would probably be my second favorite. Um, well, maybe Blur is like my favorite band, in Britpop. Manic Street Preachers, I also think is pretty amazing. They have some of the greatest fucking songs ever made, but I also think that they don't really have, a perfect album. I think that album with the fat chick on it is probably my favorite, but the Everything Must Go is probably like my preferred one, but it has some, filler on there as well. So Manson is really the only band in this style that I just love, like consistently. And mainly the Attack of the Grey Lantern was considered Britpop. The, Six is more so considered artsy progressive rock. So I love Manson because they have this like artsy kind of aesthetic, this kind of like the psychedelic tinge that Blur later had in their career, or they always kind of had here and there. So that's what I love about it. But they also have like the catchy anthemic nature of Oasis, while having like a way better vocalist. I would add. I don't think that Liam Gallagher is great, like he's an actual god on Twitter, but as a singer, I could do without personally. So I'm not a person that's buying like $200 Oasis tickets. I think that's just a scam personally. I think you're kind of brainwashed if you buy tickets like that for any band, to be honest. Like even if Opeth was performing in my hometown and they would say like $200, I still wouldn't go. I still would say like that's a scam, bro. But yeah, Shotgun was kind of the catchier songs. Let's look. Cancer's pretty fucking out there, pretty dark. Let's see. The title track, also a pretty anthemic, catchy opening song. I think that most people prefer the first side because you have Shotgun on there. That was kind of a minor hit. Cancer's also like, that song is just fucking heavy, emotional. Negative was also, I think, a small radio hit. I just love the second side of this album. Like when I said with Television, like the emotion that this dude has on his voice, and the vocal control he has on there. Like he has like a pretty high registered voice, almost squeaky in a way, but it blends in so well with the psychedelic tinges of the song that it just blends seamlessly into each other. I'm like, wow, this is like the greatest musical moment I've ever heard. Maybe outside of the outro of Orbital, Insights. Like this might be my second favorite song. Like that's how amazing it is. Like every time I hear it, I have a surreal experience with the song, with the album as a whole. Because I would listen to it here and there, and I was kind of like, it's good, but when I play this on work or something, I want some more fast-paced, energetic music that keeps me going. And this band is like kind of the opposite of that. Like they're very brooding, kind of slow. They're catchy here and there, but they're also like very up in your own ass as far as concept and feelings go. And this band is also like very kind of joking, kind of they're mocking emotions and shit. Because I believe on Cancer or Television, they have like lyrics that go like, "Oh, every relationship is meaningless because everything fucking comes and goes and lives and dies. Oh, fuck you." And I'm like, wow, this album depresses me. So in a sense, it is kind of similar to Radiohead, but this band is just a lot more fun, beat. So it's kind of like the Smiths. Like as far as the lyrics are fucking gloomy and dark, but the music is upbeat and fun. And I think those are probably like my favorite type of bands because the lyrics are just a complete fuck you to your existence. They're just like, yeah, fuck your relationship. It's meaningless. It all fucking dies. For those reasons, I just fucking love Manson because they just don't give a fuck. They're just like, yeah, I'm toying with your emotions. What are you gonna do about it, bitch? But even besides that, like these guys are just great composers. The way they structure their music is fucking dense and rich. It's just so fucking out there that like even when I listen to Television 20 times in a row, I still am dissecting pieces that I haven't heard like the 12th or the 8th time. There's always like a new spectacle coming with their music, and that's what makes it, in my opinion, the most underrated album ever because I've never heard anyone talk about this band besides this critic. And who else? Steven Wilson talked about it as well for a bit. They actually played Legacy on my work the other day because we have like an alternative 90s station playing right now. They played Legacy, and I was kind of, putting off my AirPods. I was kind of like, are they playing Manson? That's fucking wild, man. So maybe they're not underrated, but they're underrated to me. They're the most underrated band I've ever heard because I think that everyone should know this band. And usually when you talk about Britpop, if you consider these guys Britpop, they are usually the least mentioned Britpop band. Like you have Oasis, Pulp, Suede, um, Manic Street Preachers, which are all good to great bands. But I think that Manson is like the absolute best band of the genre, especially for this album, if you consider that Britpop or influenced by the wave. Unfortunately, they weren't so great after this, but this is arguably the best thing I've ever heard in my life. Television is arguably the best thing I've ever heard in my life. Being a Girl is arguably the best jam session I've ever heard a rock band play. So how can you top that? You can't. So they kind of flamed out after this, which is very unfortunate because this album is fucking amazing. I just love this album. Um, yeah, and I mean, the best description I can give about it is like, um, well, it wasn't love at first sight, but imagine like a girl maybe or like a person, a connection that you have that you've always kind of like you saw it on the side, you had kind of like mixed thoughts about it, like, can I really click with this? Oh, can it really work out? And then suddenly you just have a surreal experience with them, and you're like, wow, I am in love with her, him. I don't judge. I am in love with this person. That's kind of how I feel about this album. I just instantly, like, suddenly, this album just clicked for me, and I was just in love with this album. I was like, wow, did this is like surreal. This is like an unexplainable feeling that I can't express. So that's probably the best note to end it on, because like I can't express my love for this album slash band. It's arguably the greatest thing I've ever heard in music. Again, like with Orbital. And I'm gonna rest for now because I've almost consistently talked for like 1.5 hours. So there goes my social battery. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was fun. If there is like an album that you think is underrated that I didn't mention here, feel free to leave it in the comments. I would love to read it. Um, yeah, I'm also pretty open to chat. You know, just chatting music. If you think that this was worthwhile, or you know you're still listening to this somehow. If you think that that is fun, I can like leave my socials in the description. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about, we can just talk in like in the comments, and you know, if you want to add me, I'm mainly on Instagram and Discord. I don't really use social media a lot anymore, but you know, if you want to talk some music, then probably Insta, Discord, um, maybe how's it called again? Messenger, I believe, or Telegram. I mean, I'm also open to that, but who knows? Mainly Insta and Discord, I suppose. So if you want to chat some music, then let me know. I can probably drop my details there. Because, like you notice, I can just talk about music all day, every day. Like I don't get tired of Manson. I don't get tired of Orbital. Um, Pretty unfortunate as well, because both of those bands were like really fucking great in their peak, in their prime, and then like after this they just squandered everything. So it's really like is lightning trapped in a bottle. That's this album. That's almost every album I've mentioned on this list. But yeah, if you enjoyed it, I appreciate, you know, if you you know, drop a like, subscribe, you know, all the main things that YouTubers ask of you. And I only really ask that at the end, because I don't befuddle people with, you know, I don't beg for it like at the intro, because that's when they're the most engaged, and I want people to engage in my actual content as opposed to begging for attention. You know, I think that's kind of silly. So I only really ask it here for a reminder. You know, if you want, well, no one is asking for clarification, but that's mainly why I think like that. Like, ask it towards the end. If people really enjoy it, give them a small reminder. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, if you subscribe and like the video, you can subscribe to the video, Void. But you know, if you like the video, if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate a like. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Let me know what you would like to see in the future, what you are interested in, and let me know some underrated bands slash album that you think is great that I haven't checked out. I'm curious to read it. You know, I'm still open to new music, although you know I don't think music gets much better than this, in my opinion. But if there is some music out there, I'm always like open to check it out. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I appreciate the support if you have watched this much, and have a good day, y'all. Peace.